Snap. That was the sound of my $85,000 raw black opal bracelet hitting the marble table. My niece Chloe giggled as the platinum clasp twisted and snapped in two. Mom says your jewelry is from the flea market anyway, Auntie Simone, so it does not matter, right? I looked at the shattered stone and then at my sister Ebony, who was sipping her champagne with a smirk. Nobody at that table knew the truth. They thought I was just a gardener who played in the dirt. They had no idea I was the anonymous donor funding Chloe's $100,000 music conservatory tuition. I picked up the broken pieces of my bracelet and smiled a cold, hard smile. That night, I logged into the foundation portal and clicked Terminate Funding. Before I tell you how I brought down their house of cards, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever been the family scapegoat who finally fought back. My name is Simone, and at 32 years old, I own 3 patents for rare plant-based biochemical compounds used in luxury skincare. My bank account looks like a phone number, but to my family, I am just the dark-skinned sister who likes playing in the mud. The disrespect started the moment I pulled into the driveway of Ebony and Brad's McMansion in Atlanta. The house was a sprawling stucco monstrosity that screamed new money and bad credit. My practical sedan looked out of place next to the least luxury SUVs lining the drive. I took a deep breath and grabbed the gift bag from the passenger seat. This was supposed to be a celebration for Chloe getting into the conservatory. I wanted to be a good aunt. I walked up the front steps, smoothing down my linen dress. It was simple, bespoke, and cost more than Ebony's wedding gown, but to them it probably looked like a potato sack. Before I could even ring the bell, the heavy oak door swung open. My mother Beatrice stood there blocking the entrance like a bouncer at an exclusive club. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, and her lip curled in that familiar expression of disappointment. "Simone, what are you wearing?" my mother hissed, keeping her voice low so the guests inside would not hear. "You look like you just came from a shift at the nursery. We have important people here today, people from the symphony board. You are going to ruin the aesthetic." I looked down at my dress. It was clean pressed and appropriate. "Mom, it is a family dinner," I said, trying to step past her. She put a hand on my chest, stopping me cold. "Not through the front door looking like that. Ebony is doing a live stream in the foyer right now. Go around to the side entrance through the kitchen. And for God's sake, take off that jacket. It looks like something you found in a donation bin." The sting was familiar. My mother had always treated Ebony like a princess because of her light skin and what she called her marketable beauty. I was the dark one, the one she told to stay out of the sun, the one she expected to serve, not shine. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I could have turned around and left right then. I could have driven back to my penthouse and forgotten them. But I wanted to give Chloe her gift. I wanted to believe that maybe the next generation was different. I walked around the side of the house through the mud and wet grass, ruining my Italian leather loafers. When I entered the kitchen, the caterers looked at me with pity. I kept my head high and walked into the dining room. The air conditioning was blasting, and the room smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. My brother-in-law Brad was holding court at the head of the table. Brad was a white real estate agent who specialized in selling dreams he could not afford himself. He was loud, taking up too much space, swirling a glass of scotch that I knew was the cheapest brand poured into a crystal decanter. "Ah, look who it is," Brad boomed as I entered the room. "The family gardener has arrived. How is the grass-cutting business going, Simone? Did you wash your hands before you came in? We do not want soil on the upholstery." The guests chuckled nervously. I ignored him and found my seat at the far end of the table near the kitchen door. Of course, that was where they put me, away from the camera angles, away from the centerpieces. Ebony sat across from Brad, glowing in a sequined dress that was too tight and too bright for a Sunday dinner. She barely looked at me. She was too busy checking the viewer count on her phone, propped up against a wine glass. "Hi, Ebony," I said softly, placing the small gift box on the table. Congratulations to Chloe. This is for her. Ebony glanced at the box without touching it. Oh, thanks, Simone. Just put it over there with the others. She waved a manicured hand toward a pile of flashy gifts on the sideboard. Probably another book about trees, right? Chloe is a musician, Simone. She likes nice things, not homework. She did not even open it. Inside that box was a vintage metronome I had won at an auction in Vienna, something priceless for a true musician. But to Ebony, if it did not have a designer logo, it was trash. I sat down and unfolded my napkin. My niece Chloe sat 2 seats away from me. She was 18, talented, and completely spoiled by parents who saw her as a ticket to fame rather than a human being. She was scrolling through TikTok, ignoring everyone. So Simone Brad shouted down the table, making sure everyone could hear. I have a listing coming up in Buckhead. Huge estate. The owners need someone to clear out the weeds in the back. Minimum wage, but I figured you could use the extra cash since business is probably slow. I took a sip of water. My business just signed a $2 million licensing deal last week, Brad. I think I am okay. Brad laughed, a loud barking sound. Sure. Always the dreamer. Just trying to help you out. You know we worry about you. A single woman your age digging in the dirt. It is not dignified. My mother Beatrice chimed in from her seat next to Chloe. Brad is right, Simone. You should be grateful he is looking out for you. Look at your sister. She married well, she keeps a beautiful home. You could learn a thing or two if you stopped being so stubborn and fixed yourself up. Fixed myself up. Code for change. Everything about who I was. Code for bleach my skin, straighten my hair, and marry someone who would treat me like an accessory. I looked around the table. The crystal was fake. The smiles were tight. The debt was mounting. They were drowning in a sea of their own making, and they were using me as a life raft for their egos. They needed someone to look down on so they could feel tall. And then Chloe looked up from her phone. Her eyes landed on my wrist. On the raw black opal bracelet I had commissioned from a jeweler in Cape Town. It was dark, rough cut and wrapped in matte platinum. To an untrained eye, it looked like a rock found on the ground. You, Auntie Simone, Chloe said, wrinkling her nose. What is that on your arm? It looks like a piece of charcoal. Ebony laughed. Oh, honey, I told you. Auntie Simone loves her flea market finds. It is probably some healing crystal she got for $5. Let me see it, Chloe demanded, reaching out. She did not ask. She did not say please. She just reached across the table with her sticky hands and grabbed my wrist. That was the moment the energy in the room shifted. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Not shame anymore, but anger. Cold, sharp anger. They thought I was nothing. They thought I was their punching bag. Be careful, Chloe. I said, my voice low and dangerous. That is not a toy. But she was already pulling at the clasp, her nails digging into my skin. It is ugly anyway, she sneered. Why do you even wear this? And then she pulled hard. Too hard. The platinum clasp dug into my pulse point before giving way with a sharp metallic click. I gasped as the bracelet slid violently from my wrist, leaving a red, angry welt on my dark skin. Chloe did not even notice she had hurt me. She was too busy holding her prize up to the chandelier light, turning it over in her grease-stained fingers, like it was a piece of playground gravel. See, Mom? Chloe shrieked, her voice piercing through the dining room chatter. It is heavy. Why would you wear a rock, Auntie Simone? It is so scratchy. My hand instinctively went to my bare wrist, covering the spot where the cool metal had been just seconds ago. That bracelet was not just jewelry. It was the first thing I bought for myself after my second patent was licensed. It was raw Australian black opal, unpolished and ancient, set in a custom band that looked like twisted vines. To me, it represented resilience. To Chloe, it was just a dirty stone. Chloe. Please give that back to me, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. It is very sharp, and it is not for playing. Ebony waved her fork in the air, dismissing my concern without even looking up from her plate. Oh, relax, Simone. Let the poor girl look at it. She is an artist. She appreciates textures. Besides, it is not like it is real diamonds or anything. If she drops it, what is the worst that can happen? It is already a rock. Brad snorted into his drink. Yeah, Simone. Do not be so stingy. You probably dug that up in your backyard anyway while you were planting petunias. Let the kid have some fun. She has been practicing violin for 6 hours today. She deserves a distraction. I looked at my mother, Beatrice, expecting her to say something about manners, about not snatching things from people, but she just sighed and took a sip of her wine. Stop making a scene. Simone, my mother, said, her eyes cold and hard. It is just costume jewelry. You are making Chloe feel bad. Look at her face. I looked at Chloe. She did not look bad. She looked triumphant. She looked like a predator who had just snatched a rabbit from a trap. She was tossing the bracelet from one hand to the other, testing its weight, her eyes glinting with a mix of curiosity and malice. She knew she was not supposed to take it. That was the point. In this house, boundaries did not apply to Chloe. She was the prodigy. I was the prop. That is not costume jewelry, I said, my voice tight. It is delicate. Chloe, please hand it to me. Now. Chloe pouted, her lower lip jutting out in a practiced expression of victimhood. Mom, Auntie Simone is being mean to me. She is yelling. I am not yelling, I said, though I wanted to scream. I just want my property back. Ebony rolled her eyes and slammed her napkin onto the table. My God, Simone. You are so dramatic. It is 5 minutes of your time. Just let her hold it. You act like it is the crown jewels. It is probably full of bad energy anyway, coming from whatever thrift store bin you fished it out of. The disrespect was suffocating. They did not just devalue my possessions, they devalued my right to own them. In their eyes, I was not allowed to have things that were off limits. I was the family servant, and my things were public property. I watched Chloe run her fingernail along the raw edge of the opal, a stone that had formed in the dark over millions of years, and I felt a crack form in my own composure. They had no idea what she was holding. They had no idea who I really was. Chloe slipped the cold metal band over her hand. It was far too large for her slender wrist, sliding all the way down to her forearm like a shackle. She held her arm up, twisting it this way and that, making a show of inspecting it with exaggerated disgust. Mom is right, she giggled, looking over at Ebony, who was busy refilling her glass. Auntie Simone really does wear trash from the flea market. It does not even sparkle, Mom. Is this plastic? It feels like plastic. Ebony let out a short, sharp laugh. I told you, honey. Your aunt has very specific tastes. She likes things that look like they were dug out of the ground. Probably because that is where she spends all her time. It is not plastic. I said, my voice tight in my throat. It is platinum and raw opal. And it is custom made. Please take it off, Chloe. It is not a toy. Platinum. Brad choked on his scotch, coughing loudly. He slammed his hand on the table, his face turning red with amusement. Simone, come on. You do not have to lie to impress us. We know you are on a budget. There is no shame in wearing costume jewelry. You bought that at the swap meet down on 4th Street, right? I saw a vendor there selling rocks just like that. $5 a pop. The table erupted in laughter. Even my mother Beatrice cracked a smile, shaking her head as if I were a child telling a ridiculous tall tale. Oh, let her dream, Brad, my mother said. If Simone wants to pretend her little trinkets are valuable, let her. It is harmless. It was not harmless. They were stripping away my dignity layer by layer, reducing my achievements to fantasies and my possessions to garbage. I watched Chloe feed off their energy. She saw that humiliating me was a game, and she wanted to be the winner. She stood up on her chair, towering over me. She began to shake her arm violently, flailing her wrist back and forth. The heavy stone slapped against her skin with a dull, thudding sound. But she did not stop. Look at me, she shrieked, spinning around. I am Auntie Simone. I play in the dirt and wear rocks. Chloe, get down from there right now, I said, standing up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor, but no one else moved. They were enjoying the show too much. She stopped spinning and looked down at me, her eyes glinting with malice. She looked at the bracelet dangling from her wrist. and then at the solid slab of Italian marble that served as their dining table. "You said it is a real stone, right, Auntie?" she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Real stones are hard. They do not break." "Do not," I warned, taking a step forward. "If it is real, it should be able to take a little hit, right?" she taunted. "Let us test it. Let us see if Auntie is a liar." She raised her arm high above her head. The movement was slow, deliberate, and terrifying. I saw the muscles in her arm tense. I saw the anticipation on her face. She was not just a spoiled child in that moment. She was a reflection of everything her parents had taught her. She believed she was entitled to destroy anything that belonged to me because in her world, I did not matter. She brought her arm down. The sound was sickening. It was not the hollow clatter of plastic hitting stone. It was the sharp geometric snap of platinum giving way under force, followed by the dry crunch of a gemstone fracturing. Time seemed to freeze as my bracelet exploded against the marble table. The custom clasp I had designed to mimic the twisting roots of a mangrove tree sheared clean off. The raw black opal, the heart of the piece, split down the center, sending a shard of iridescent blue and green skittering across the white tablecloth like a dying beetle. I sat there frozen, my breath caught in my throat. $85,000. That was the insurance valuation of the piece, but the sentimental value was incalculable. It was the trophy for my first major breakthrough, the physical manifestation of the sleepless nights and the years of being told I was just playing in the dirt. Now it lay in ruins next to a plate of half-eaten rolls. Chloe stared at the broken pieces for a second, her mouth slightly open. For a heartbeat, I thought she might apologize. I thought the reality of what she had done might penetrate her entitlement. But then she shrugged and brushed the platinum chain off her wrist like it was a dead insect. "Oops," she said, her voice devoid of any real regret. "I told you it was brittle, Auntie. You should buy better stuff." "See, Mom, it broke right away. It was totally fake." I reached out with a trembling hand to pick up the main fragment of the opal. The fracture line was jagged, destroying the integrity of the stone. It was ruined. Irreparably ruined. "Oh my God, Simone, stop looking like someone died," Ebony huffed, rolling her eyes. "It is just a bracelet. I will buy you a new one at Target tomorrow. They have those little beaded ones you like. They are probably sturdier than that junk." Brad leaned back in his chair and let out a bellow of laughter that shook his jowls. He slapped the table, making the silverware jump. "You certainly proved your point, Chloe. That thing was cheap as dirt." He looked at me, his face red and sweaty. "Come on, Simone. Do not look so tragic. Do not make the kid cry over a $5 plastic toy. You act like she just smashed a Rolex." "She did not smash a Rolex," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the ringing in my ears. "She smashed something worth more than your car, Brad." But they did not hear me, or they chose not to. My mother Beatrice reached over and patted Chloe's hand, soothing the girl who had just destroyed my property. "It is okay, sweetie. Grandma knows you did not mean it. Auntie Simone is just being sensitive again. She always gets so attached to her little trinkets." Beatrice looked at me with cold, dead eyes. "Clean that up, Simone. We are trying to eat and nobody wants to look at your broken rocks. It is bad luck." I looked at them, really looked at them. Brad wiping grease from his lip while chuckling at my expense. Ebony checking her reflection in her spoon, completely indifferent to my loss. Chloe smirking because she knew there would be no consequences. And my mother protecting the aggressor while blaming the victim. They were laughing. They were actually laughing. Something inside me snapped just as cleanly as the platinum clasp. The grief I felt for the bracelet evaporated, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. I realized in that moment that they would never see me. They would never respect me. And they would never stop taking from me unless I forced them to stop. I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I did not cry. I simply picked up the pieces of my $85,000 bracelet and wrapped them carefully in my linen napkin. I placed the bundle in my purse. "You are right, Mom. I said, my voice steady and smooth like glass. It was just a cheap thing. It does not matter. Brad grinned, pointing his fork at me. See? That is the spirit. Finally showing some maturity, Simone. Maybe there is hope for you yet. I smiled back at him. It was a terrifying smile, but he was too arrogant to notice. Yes, Brad. I think I am finally growing up. I stood up from the table. Where are you going? Ebony asked, annoyed. We haven't even cut the cake. I lost my appetite, I said. I am going home. Beatrice scoffed. Running away again, just like a child. You are ruining Chloe's celebration. I looked at my niece, who was now busy picking at her cuticles, bored with the drama she had caused. I looked at the girl whose tuition I had paid for 10 years. The girl whose future was currently resting on my bank account. Happy conservatory acceptance, Chloe, I said softly. I hope you enjoy every moment of it. I walked out of the dining room. I did not go out the back door through the kitchen this time. I walked straight to the front foyer, past the live stream setup, past the curated art that belonged to the staging company Brad used. I opened the heavy oak front door and stepped out into the humid Atlanta night. As I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone. I did not call my jeweler to see if the bracelet could be fixed. I opened the banking app for the Simone Williams Charitable Trust. I navigated to the recurring payments tab. There it was, the pending transfer for $100,000 to the New England Conservatory of Music, scheduled for tomorrow morning. I tapped the screen. Cancel, confirm, processing, transferred, canceled. I sat in my car and watched the notification pop up. It was done. The money was gone, and the war had just begun. The room did not fall silent because they were ashamed. It fell silent because they were waiting for me to clean up the mess my existence had apparently caused. Brad was already reaching for the wine bottle, his face flushed and greasy, while Ebony picked at her salad as if the destruction of an $85,000 object was nothing more than a minor interruption to her meal. Chloe had already lost interest, tapping away on her phone again, secure in the knowledge that no matter what she broke, there would be no consequences. I stood there, my purse heavy on my shoulder, feeling a strange sensation wash over me. It was not the hot flush of embarrassment I was used to. It was not the stinging tears of rejection. It was cold. It was a deep glacial chill that started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. It was the absence of hope. For 32 years, I had held on to a tiny, foolish hope that if I just achieved enough, if I just gave enough, they would finally see me. That hope died on the marble table alongside my opal. Beatrice stared at me, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. Her eyes were hard, devoid of any maternal warmth. "Where are you going, Simone?" she snapped. "Sit down. You are making everyone uncomfortable. We have not even discussed the logistics for Chloe's drop-off at the conservatory next week." I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the lines of bitterness around her mouth, the calculating glint in her eyes. I saw a woman who had traded her daughter's happiness for social currency. "You are right, Mom," I said. My voice was so quiet, so devoid of emotion, that Brad actually stopped pouring his wine to look at me. Right about what Beatrice asked, narrowing her eyes. "I do not fit in here," I said. Beatrice let out a short, dismissive huff. "Oh, stop with the self-pity. It is unbecoming. Just sit down and eat your dinner." "No," I said. And the word hung in the air, simple and absolute. I turned my back on them. I did not storm out. I did not slam the chair. I moved with a slow, deliberate grace that I had never allowed myself to show them before. My heels clicked rhythmically on the hardwood floor of the hallway, a steady metronome counting down the final seconds of their comfortable lives. "Hey, Brad," called out, his voice booming and arrogant. "Don't be like that, Simone. Come back and have a drink. You're being rude." I kept walking. As I reached the heavy oak door, I heard Ebony mutter, "Let her go, Mom. She just wants attention. She will be back next week begging to babysit. I opened the door and the humid night air hit my face. I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me. The latch clicked. It was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. As I walked down the long, winding driveway toward my car, a countdown began in my head. It was not a countdown to an explosion, but a countdown to their extinction. 10. That was the number of years I had secretly funded the Simone Williams Charitable Trust. 9. That was the number of semesters I had paid for Ebony's business degrees that she never used. 8. The number of times Brad had asked me for a short-term loan that never got repaid. 7. The age Chloe was when I bought her first violin because Ebony said they couldn't afford it. I reached my car and unlocked it. The interior was cool and quiet, a sanctuary. I sat in the driver's seat and looked back at the house. The windows were glowing with warm light, a picture-perfect tableau of a happy, successful family. They were eating my food, drinking wine I had probably paid for in a roundabout way, and laughing at my expense. They had no idea that the foundation of their entire existence had just walked out the door. 3, 2, 1. I pulled out my phone. The screen glowed in the darkness. I opened the browser and navigated to the donor portal for the conservatory. The payment was pending. $100,000. A scholarship for a brilliant young musician named Chloe. I pressed the cancel button. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure you want to cancel this transaction? This action cannot be undone. I looked at the house one last time. I thought about the snap of the platinum. I thought about the flea market comment. I thought about 32 years of being the dirt they walked on. I tapped yes. The screen refreshed. Transaction canceled. I put the phone down and started the engine. As I backed out of the driveway, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I felt lighter than I had in my entire life. The check had bounced, and so would they. I drove for 20 minutes in silence, the city lights blurring past my window like streaks of neon paint. The adrenaline from canceling the transfer was starting to fade, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache behind my eyes. I pulled into the underground garage of my building. It was not the street parking spot my family imagined I fought for every night. It was a private, climate-controlled bay next to a vintage Aston Martin, but they did not know that. They never asked where I lived. To them, I existed in a vacuum suspended somewhere between their needs and my utility. I had just shut the car door when my phone vibrated in my purse. The screen lit up with a picture of Ebony smiling her perfect pageant smile. My stomach tightened. Part of me, the part that was still 5 years old and desperate for my big sister's approval, hoped she was calling to apologize. Maybe she had realized how cruel she had been. Maybe she wanted to make sure I got home safe. I slid my thumb across the screen. Hello, Ebony. There was no greeting, no hesitation. Just the frantic, high-pitched tone of someone who believes the world revolves around them. Simone, thank God you answered. I am freaking out. I leaned against the cool metal of my car. Is this about the bracelet, Ebony? Because if you are calling to tell me it was just a rock again, I am going to hang up. Ebony made a noise of impatience. Oh my God. Get over it, Simone. I already told you I would get you a gift card to Claire's or something. This is important. It is about Chloe's tuition. I closed my eyes. The tuition. The money I had canceled less than an hour ago. What about it? The portal, Ebony said, her voice rising an octave. I just logged in to check the status for the fall semester. It usually says pending or processing by now. But it says, payment failed. Failed, Simone. That is $50,000. I kept my voice flat. Maybe it is a glitch. It cannot be a glitch, Ebony snapped. I called the registrar and they said the funds were retracted. Retracted? Who does that? We have deposits due on Monday. We have the flight to Paris booked for the celebration trip. I cannot pay for all that right now. Brad's commission check is late, and we are a little liquid poor at the moment. Liquid poor. That was code for broke, but wearing Gucci. So what do you want me to do about it? I asked. I am just the gardener, remember? Exactly, Ebony said, and I could hear the sneer in her voice even through the phone. You are always digging around in the gardens of those wealthy people in Buckhead. You hear things. You know who the donors are. Maybe you know who runs this anonymous foundation. I gripped the phone tighter. You want me to ask my clients if they forgot to pay your daughter's tuition? Yes, Ebony said, as if it were the most logical thing in the world. Just ask around. See if anyone forgot to sign a check or if their accountant made a mistake. Tell them Chloe is a prodigy. Tell them it would be a tragedy to lose her talent because of a banking error. You are good at begging, Simone. You have been begging for our attention for years. Put it to good use. The air in the garage suddenly felt very thin. She was asking me, the person she had just humiliated, to go hat in hand to strangers to fund her lifestyle. She had no idea she was speaking to the donor. She had no idea she was asking the bank to reopen the vault she had just tried to burn down. I will see what I can do, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. Good, Ebony said. And Simone, fix your attitude before you talk to them. Nobody likes a sour face. That is probably why you are still single. Fix this for me, and maybe I will let you sit at the main table next Thanksgiving. The line went dead. She hung up without a goodbye, without a thank you. I stood there in the silence of the garage staring at the phone. She wanted me to fix it. She wanted me to use my connections to save her. I walked toward the elevator that required a biometric scan to open. I pressed my thumb against the glass. The door slid open, revealing the gold-mirrored interior. I will fix it all right, I whispered to my reflection. I will fix it so permanently, you will never be able to break anything of mine again. The elevator doors slid open directly into my living room, revealing a silence so profound, it felt like a physical embrace. The air inside was cool and smelled of white tea and cedar. Not the damp earth and fertilizer my mother always claimed clung to my skin. I kicked off my muddy loafers and stepped onto the heated limestone floors. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Atlanta skyline sprawled out before me, a glittering grid of ambition and light. My family thought I lived in a basement apartment in East Point, trying to make ends meet selling herbs at the farmer's market. They thought I drove a 10-year-old car because I could not afford a new one. They had no idea that the entire top floor of the Sovereign building belonged to the girl they made eat in the kitchen. I walked past the custom Italian sofa and the original Kehinde Wiley painting hanging on the west wall. Ebony would have called it a print. She would have asked how much it cost before asking what it meant or who the artist was. I went straight to the master suite. The walk-in closet was larger than my childhood bedroom, lined with rows of clothes I never wore around them. Silk cashmere and structured blazers that whispered power instead of screaming for attention like Ebony's sequined disasters. I approached the full-length mirror at the end of the room. I pressed my palm against the glass in a specific sequence. The mirror slid silently to the left, revealing a steel wall safe embedded in the concrete core of the building. I keyed in the code, a series of numbers that corresponded to the date I filed my first patent. The heavy door swung open with a soft hydraulic hiss. Inside, it was not stacks of cash or gold bars. It was paper, thick, cream-colored paper bound in leather folders. United States Patent Number 9842. Method for the extraction and stabilization of rare botanical alkaloids. That single document was worth more than Brad's entire real estate portfolio combined. Next to it were the licensing agreements with the French cosmetic houses, the ones that paid me royalties every time someone bought a jar of night cream in Paris or Tokyo. I took the linen napkin from my purse and unfolded it gently. The broken pieces of the black opal glittered under the recessed lighting. It looked tragic sitting there next to the proof of my genius. I placed the shattered stone on the velvet shelf right beside the deed to the building my sister lived in. That was another secret I kept. The shell company that owned their mortgage note belonged to me. I had bought it 6 months ago when the bank threatened to foreclose. I had saved them then without them ever knowing, just to keep a roof over Chloe's head. I closed the safe. The mirror slid back into place, hiding the truth once again. My reflection stared back at me. I did not look like a gardener. I looked like a woman who was done being stepped on. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had on speed dial. It rang once. "Simone, it is late. Is everything all right?" It was David, my attorney. His voice was sharp, alert, professional. "I am fine, David," I said, walking over to the window to look down at the city that looked so small from this height. "But we need to make some administrative changes to the trust." "Okay, what kind of changes?" "I want to terminate the music scholarship fund," I said, my voice devoid of hesitation. David paused. "For the next semester." "No," I said. "Permanently. Revoke the acceptance of the upcoming invoice. And David, I want you to freeze the anonymous grants for the house maintenance too. The landscaping, the pool service, the roof repairs. Cut it all." "Simone, are you sure?" David asked, his voice careful. "That family relies on those grants. Without the maintenance fund, they will fall behind on the HOA fees. They could lose the house." I pressed my hand against the cold glass of the window. "I know, David. That is the point. They like to call me a gardener. It is time I did some pruning. Kill the funding. Tonight." I hung up the phone and watched the lights of the city blur. I was not the poor relation anymore. I was the hand of God in their lives, and I had just closed my fist. The lobby of Brad's brokerage firm smelled of aggressive cologne and over-leveraged ambition. It was a glass and steel temple to the kind of money that shouted because it was terrified of silence. I was there for a reason that felt almost laughable now. I had left my sunglasses in his SUV 3 weeks ago when he deigned to give me a ride to the nursery, and he had texted me demanding I come get them because they were cluttering his center console. Even in doing a favor, he had to make me feel like a burden. I walked past the receptionist, who was too busy filing her nails to look up at a woman in work boots and a canvas jacket. I knew where his corner office was. He liked to brag that it had the best view of the skyline, but I knew it also had the highest rent in the building. As I approached the frosted glass door, I heard his voice. It was not the booming, confident baritone he used at dinner parties. It was high, thin, and edged with a panic that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Please, listen to me. I just need 48 hours. I stopped. The door was cracked open just an inch. Through the gap, I could see him. Brad was pacing back and forth, his expensive suit jacket thrown on the floor, his tie loosened. He was sweating. He looked like a man who was watching the water rise above his chin. "I am not trying to dodge you, Marcus. I swear. The liquidity is there. It is just tied up in transfers." He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end of the line. I pressed myself against the wall, out of sight. "Marcus, that was not a bank. That was a bookie or a loan shark." "No, do not come to the house," Brad hissed, his voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "My wife is there. My daughter is there. If you show up, it ruins everything. Just give me until Tuesday." He stopped pacing and leaned heavily against his desk, gripping the edge until his knuckles turned white. "Listen, the money is coming. My daughter got into that fancy music school. The conservatory. Yeah, the one with the big tuition. There is a scholarship fund. A private donor drops $50,000 into the account for the first semester next week." My breath hitched in my chest. I stood frozen, my hand hovering over my mouth. He was talking about my money. He was talking about the grant I had set up to ensure Chloe had a future. "I have access to the custodial account," Brad said into the phone, his voice gaining a desperate sort of confidence. "As soon as the wire hits, I will transfer it out. I will pay you the 30 grand I owe plus the interest, and I will put the rest into that Ethereum coin you told me about. I will double it before the tuition bill is actually due. She will never know the money was missing. It is a victimless crime, Marcus. Just a short-term loan. A victimless crime." He was planning to embezzle his own daughter's education fund to pay off a gambling debt and throw the rest into a volatile crypto market. He was going to gamble away Chloe's future because he could not control his own impulses. I watched him wipe his forehead with his sleeve. He looked pathetic. He looked dangerous. This was the man who had mocked my career the night before. This was the man who called me a gardener while he plotted to harvest his own child's potential. Okay. Tuesday. I promise. You will have your cash. Just stay away from the house. He hung up the phone and slumped into his leather chair, burying his face in his hands. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. I did not go in to get my sunglasses. I did not confront him. I turned around and walked back toward the elevators, my steps silent on the plush carpet. I had felt a twinge of guilt the night before when I canceled the funding. I had worried that maybe I was punishing Chloe for her parents' sins. But now, as I stepped into the elevator and watched the doors close, I knew I had done the right thing. If I had sent that money, it would never have reached the school. It would have gone straight into the pocket of a man named Marcus. Brad thought he was waiting for a lifeline. He had no idea I had already cut the rope. I sat at the small bistro table, gripping my iced coffee until my knuckles turned white. My mother Beatrice had demanded we meet at this trendy cafe in Buckhead, not because she wanted to see me, but because she wanted to be seen. When she finally breezed in 20 minutes late, she did not apologize. She just adjusted her oversized sunglasses and frowned at my table in the corner. "Why do you always pick the darkest corner, Simone?" she sighed, sliding into the chair opposite me without a hug or a hello. "It is like you are trying to disappear. Although with that skin, I suppose it is hard to blend in anywhere." There it was, the comment. It always started like that, subtle at first, then sharp as a razor. "I am just drinking coffee, Mom," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "You said you wanted to talk about the family reunion." Beatrice waved her hand dismissively. "We can talk about that later. First, we need to talk about you. Look at you, Simone. You are sitting here in the dark wearing navy blue. Do you not know any better? You are already so dark-skinned. Wearing dark colors just makes you look like a shadow. You disappear." I looked down at my linen blouse. It was elegant, professional, and expensive. But to Beatrice, it was just another mistake. "I like this color," I said quietly. "Well, it does nothing for you," she snapped, taking a sip of the water the waiter had placed down. "Look at your sister. Ebony knows how to dress. She wears pastels, creams, golds. She knows how to highlight her complexion. She has that beautiful caramel skin that lights up a room. She is the face of this family, Simone. You need to understand that. The face of the family." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "So what does that make me, Mom?" I asked, looking her directly in the eyes. "If she is the face, what am I?" Beatrice let out a short, cruel laugh. "Do not be dramatic. You have your place. You are the strong one, the worker. You have that sturdy build and that skin that can take the sun. You were built for labor, Simone. Ebony was built for adoration. Her job is to shine and elevate our status. Your job is to support her, to be the background that makes her pop." I felt the air leave my lungs. It was not just favoritism. It was deep internalized hatred that she was spewing at me over a latte. She genuinely believed that my value was intrinsically lower because of the melanin in my skin. She believed I was designed by nature to be a servant to my lighter-skinned sister. "You want me to be her shadow," I whispered. "I want you to know your role," Beatrice said, leaning forward, her eyes hard behind her glasses. "Ebony is marrying up. She is bringing prestige to this family. You need to stop trying to compete with her. Stop buying that flashy jewelry. Stop trying to act like you are on her level. You are the soil, Simone. She is the flower. Without you, she cannot grow, but nobody puts the dirt in a vase." I looked at the woman who gave birth to me. I saw the self-hatred she had projected onto me for 3 decades. I saw the way she measured love by the shade of a paper bag. And I realized that no amount of money, No amount of success would ever make me bright enough for her. I picked up my purse. I did not argue. I did not cry. I just looked at her and nodded. "You are right, Mom," I said, standing up. "I am the soil, and I think it is time I stopped feeding the flower." I walked out into the bright Atlanta sun, and for the first time in my life, I did not feel the need to hide from it. I let it warm my dark skin, and I felt powerful. I sat at the glass desk in my home office, the glow of 3 high-definition monitors illuminating my face. To my family, I was a woman who spent her days with dirt under her fingernails. But here in this room, I was the architect of their reality. I opened the secure email client for the Simone Williams Charitable Trust. The interface was sleek, minimalist, and unforgiving, just like me. I pulled up the draft I had written in my head 1,000 times over the last 24 hours. It was addressed to the Dean of Admissions at the New England Conservatory of Music. I carbon copied Ebony on the message. The subject line was simple: urgent notice regarding scholarship award for Chloe Williams. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I thought about the way Chloe had snapped my bracelet. I thought about Brad sweating in his office, plotting to steal this very money to pay a loan shark. I thought about my mother telling me I was born to be a shadow. They wanted money. They wanted prestige. They wanted to stand on my shoulders and call themselves tall. I began to type. Dear Dean of Admissions, please be advised that the Simone Williams Charitable Trust is exercising its right to immediately suspend the full tuition grant previously awarded to student Chloe Williams. I paused. That was the what. Now for the why. I needed language that was vague enough to be legal, but specific enough to terrify them. This decision follows a standard review of the beneficiary's financial environment. We have received credible intelligence suggesting that the funds intended for educational purposes are at high risk of misappropriation due to the financial instability and ethical violations of the custodial guardians. Furthermore, the Foundation maintains a strict moral integrity clause regarding the conduct of its beneficiaries and their families. Recent events have demonstrated a misalignment with our core values of humility, respect, and honesty. I read it over. It was cold. It was corporate. It was devastating. It did not just take away the money. It stained their reputation. It told the school that this family was a liability. Therefore, effective immediately, all pending transfers are canceled. The grant is revoked indefinitely. We wish the student the best in securing alternative funding. Sincerely, the Board of Trustees. I was the board. I was the trust. I was the bank. I took a sip of my white tea. This was it. The moment the ground fell out from under them. I moved the cursor to the send button. I did not hesitate. I did not flinch. Click, sent. Across the city, in the living room of the house I secretly owned, Ebony was likely pouring another glass of wine, probably celebrating the trip to Paris she had booked on a credit card she could not pay off. She was probably laughing at me right now, telling Brad how she put me in my place. Her phone was sitting on the marble island, the screen dark. And then it happened. Ping. The notification light flashed, a single white blink in the darkness of their ignorance. The screen lit up with the preview of the email. Important scholarship update. Ebony reached for the phone, her manicured nails clicking against the glass. She probably thought it was a confirmation of the wire transfer. She probably thought it was the money Brad was waiting to steal. She unlocked the phone. I leaned back in my chair and watched the city lights. I could almost hear the scream from here. The scream that tore through the McMansion was not just loud. It was the sound of a lifestyle imploding. Ebony dropped her phone onto the quartz countertop as if it had burned her hand. Her face, usually composed for social media, was twisted into a mask of pure terror. What happened? Brad rushed into the kitchen, his eyes wide and frantic. He had been pacing the living room waiting for the wire transfer notification so he could siphon it off to pay his loan shark. They canceled it. Ebony gasped, clutching her chest. The trust. They sent an email. Funding suspended indefinitely due to ethical violations. Brad snatched the phone from the counter. That is impossible. Ethical violations, what does that even mean? He scrolled through the email, his hands shaking. This has to be a mistake, a computer error. We need that money, Ebony. The tuition deposit is due in 48 hours. It is not just the tuition, Ebony wailed, sinking onto a bar stool. Brad, I did something. Brad looked up from the phone, sweat beading on his forehead. What did you do? I thought the money was guaranteed, Ebony sobbed. The acceptance letter came last week. The trust has paid for everything for 10 years. So I wanted to celebrate. I wanted Chloe to have the full experience before she started school. Brad went very still. What did you do, Ebony? I booked the trip to Paris, she whispered, tears streaming down her face, ruining her spray tan. First-class tickets, the suite at the Ritz, the private shopper appointment at Chanel. I put it all on the black card. The blood drained from Brad's face. The black card. The one we maxed out last month. The one I told you not to touch until my commission check cleared. I used the savings, Ebony cried. The emergency fund. I transferred it all to pay down the card so I could book the trip. I thought the $50,000 was coming tomorrow. I thought we would just pay ourselves back. Brad looked like he was going to be sick. You spent the savings. All of it. It was $20,000. Brad Ebony defended herself, her voice rising to a shriek. I wanted my daughter to have a nice graduation gift. How was I supposed to know the scholarship would get cut? We have nothing now. Zero. Brad slammed his fist onto the island, cracking the expensive stone surface. We do not just have nothing, Ebony. We have less than nothing. If that tuition is not paid, Chloe loses her spot. If that money does not hit the account, I cannot pay Marcus. Who is Marcus? Ebony asked, sniffing. Brad ignored her. He was doing mental math, calculating the speed of his own destruction. They were standing in a $2 million house, wearing $5,000 worth of clothes, and they did not have enough liquid cash to buy a pizza. The facade was not just cracking, it was falling down around their ears. Fix it, Brad Ebony demanded, reverting to her usual entitlement. Call the school, call the trust. Tell them it is a mistake. Tell them who we are. Brad stared at her. They know who we are, Ebony. That is the problem. They know exactly who we are. From the hallway, Chloe walked in holding her violin case, oblivious to the fact that her parents had just bankrupted her future. Mom, she whined. The Wi-Fi is slow. Can you upgrade the data plan? Ebony looked at her daughter, and for the first time in her life, she did not see a prodigy. She saw a bill she could not pay. The ring light reflected in Ebony's tear-filled eyes as she adjusted the angle of her phone. She was sitting in her bedroom wearing a simple white t-shirt and no makeup, a calculated move to look vulnerable. Behind her, the carefully curated background of family photos and soft lighting created the perfect stage for her performance. She took a shaky breath, pressed record, and let the first tear fall right on cue. Hey guys, she whispered, her voice trembling just enough to sound authentic. I know I usually come on here to share happy moments and fashion tips, but today I have to share something really hard, something that has devastated our family. She paused, looking away from the camera as if too overcome with emotion to continue. In reality, she was checking the viewer count. As the numbers climbed, she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You all know how hard my daughter Chloe has worked. She is a prodigy, a violin virtuoso. Getting into the conservatory was her dream. And we thought we had secured a scholarship from a prestigious foundation to cover her tuition. We trusted them. We built our lives around their promise. She sniffled, leaning closer to the lens. But today we found out it was all a lie. The foundation pulled the funding without warning, without explanation. They just cut us off days before the semester starts. We are victims of a cruel scam. a bait and switch designed to hurt a young artist. I watched the live stream from my office, my expression unreadable. She was good. I had to give her that. She was painting herself as the innocent mother fighting for her child's future, conveniently leaving out the part where she had spent the emergency fund on a luxury vacation. "We are heartbroken," Ebony continued, her voice gaining strength. "We have already booked flights, made arrangements. And now we are facing a financial crisis because of someone else's malice. We don't know what to do. Chloe is upstairs crying right now. Her dreams are being crushed because some faceless organization decided to play God with our lives." The comments were already flooding in. Support, outrage, offers of help. People were buying it. They saw a beautiful mother in distress, not a manipulator scrambling to cover her own tracks. That is why she looked directly into the camera, her eyes wide and pleading. "I have started a GoFundMe. I hate asking for help, I really do. But for Chloe, I will do anything. If you can spare even $1 to help us fight this injustice, to help us keep her dream alive, we would be forever grateful. We are not just fighting for tuition. We are fighting against a system that thinks it can use families like ours as pawns." I leaned back in my chair, slow clapping in the silence of my penthouse. A system. She called me a system. She called my generosity a scam. It was impressive, really. The audacity, the sheer unadulterated narcissism. She ended the stream with a brave little smile and a whisper. "Thank you for listening. Love you guys." I closed the window. She thought she had won the public opinion war. She thought she could crowdfund her way out of the hole she had dug. But she had made a fatal mistake. In her rush to play the victim, she had accused a charitable trust of fraud. And unlike her, my trust had lawyers. Lots of them. I picked up my phone and dialed David. "Did you see it?" I asked. "I saw it," David replied, his voice dry. "Defamation. Libel. Fraudulent solicitation of funds. Shall I draft the cease and desist or go straight to the platform to have the campaign removed?" "Let it run for a few hours," I said. "Let her think she is winning. Let her spend the money in her head. Then hit her with everything. I want the platform to ban her. I want the donors to demand refunds. And David, I want a public statement from the trust clarifying exactly why the funding was pulled. Ethical violations. Make sure that phrase is in bold. Understood?" I hung up. Ebony wanted an audience. I was going to give her one she would never forget. The morning sun was already blazing as I walked from the farmer's market to my car, my arms full of heirloom tomato plants. The air smelled of exhaust and hot asphalt, a stark contrast to the quiet cool of my greenhouse. I was halfway across the parking lot when a shadow fell over me. "Simone, wait up." It was Brad. He was leaning against the hood of my sedan wearing sunglasses that cost more than my first car. He looked casual, relaxed even, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands kept balling into fists in his pockets. He was desperate, and desperate men were dangerous. I did not stop walking. "I have nothing to say to you, Brad. Move." He pushed off the car, blocking my path. His smile was tight, forced. "Come on, Simone. Do not be like that. We are family." "I just want to talk." I shifted the crate of plants to my hip. "We stopped being family when you let your daughter break my property and then laughed about it. Now get out of my way before I call security." He laughed, a nervous, jittery sound. "Security? You think you are some kind of VIP? Look, I know you are mad. I get it. But we can fix this. You and me. We can make a deal." "A deal?" I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of deal could you possibly offer me, Brad? You are broke. Your wife is begging strangers on the internet for cash. And you are standing in a parking lot trying to intimidate a woman you think is a gardener." His face darkened for a second, his mask slipping. "I know you have money, Simone. I have seen your receipts. You buy high-end fertilizer, you have good tools. You have been saving up right, squirreling away your little pennies from selling vegetables." I almost laughed. He thought my fortune came from selling tomatoes. He thought my wealth was a coffee can full of cash under a mattress. "So what if I have savings?" I asked, playing along. Brad stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I need a loan. Just a small one. 20,000. Cash. No paper trail. $20,000. It was pocket change to me. I had spent more than that on a single lab centrifuge, but to him it was a lifeline. And why would I give you $20,000, Brad? Because I can help you, he said, his eyes gleaming. I can talk to Beatrice. I can talk to Ebony. I can tell them to lay off. I can make them treat you better. You want a seat at the table, right? You want to be respected. I can make that happen. For 20 grand, I will be your biggest advocate. I stared at him. He was selling me basic human decency. He was putting a price tag on respect. He thought my dignity was something he could barter with something he could grant me if I paid his ransom. You think I want to buy my way back into that house? I asked, my voice cold. You think I want to pay for the privilege of being insulted by you and your wife? Brad shrugged. Everyone wants to belong, Simone. And let us be honest, you are lonely. You have no one. We are all you have got. 20,000 is a small price to pay for family. It was such a pure distillation of their worldview. Everything was transactional. Love was a commodity. Relationships were leverage. I set the crate of plants down on the pavement. I straightened up, looking him in the eye. I am going to tell you this once, Brad. I do not want your help. I do not want your advocacy. And I definitely do not want your version of family. Brad's face twisted into a sneer. Don't be stupid, Simone. You think you are better than us because you have a few bucks saved up. You are still just the help. You will always be the help. Now give me the money, or I will make sure you never see Chloe again. There it was. The threat, the leverage. He thought he could use my love for his daughter against me. But he did not know that I had already cut the cord. He did not know that Chloe was just another bad investment I had written off. I picked up my crate. No, Brad. Get out of my way. He lunged for me, grabbing my arm. Listen to me, you ungrateful little... I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. I just looked at his hand on my arm, and then I looked at his face. Let go. I said, my voice low and calm. Or you will regret it. He hesitated. He saw something in my eyes he had never seen before. It wasn't fear. It wasn't submission. It was power. Pure, unadulterated power. He released me, stepping back as if he had been burned. You are making a mistake, Simone, he spat. A big mistake. I unlocked my car and put the plants in the back seat. I got in and started the engine. As I drove away, I saw him in the rearview mirror, standing alone in the empty parking lot, a man who thought he was a king, realizing he was just a pawn. I paused with my hand on the door handle. The metal was hot against my palm, baking under the Atlanta sun. Brad thought he had won. He thought his vague threat about cutting me off from Chloe had landed. He stood there panting slightly, his chest heaving under his linen shirt, expecting me to crumble. He expected me to reach for my checkbook and pay the toll to cross the bridge back into their good graces. I turned back to face him slowly. I let my eyes travel over him, from his thinning hair to his scuffed loafers. I took in the desperation radiating off him like heat waves. $20,000, I repeated, my voice flat. That is the price tag you put on dignity. That is what it costs to get you to tell my mother to stop abusing me. Brad smirked, thinking he had me. It is a bargain, Simone. Think of it as an investment in your future happiness. You pay the fee, you get the family. Simple economics. I threw my head back and laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was a sharp, incredulous sound that startled a flock of pigeons nearby. The absurdity of it was almost beautiful. He was trying to extort a woman who could buy his entire firm and fire him before lunch. He was trying to shake down a lioness for loose change. Brad's smile faltered. What is so funny? You are, I said, wiping a tear of mirth from my eye. You really have no idea, do you? You think you are offering me a lifeline, but you are just trying to sell me a ticket to a sinking ship. I stepped closer to him, invading his personal space. He flinched, surprised by my aggression. You think my value is only $20,000, Brad? I asked. my voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the parking lot noise. You think that is all I am worth? A used car? A few months of rent? You think that is the ceiling of my existence? Brad stepped back, unnerved. I do not know what you are talking about. I am offering you a way back in. I do not want back in, I said. And as for my value, let us just say you could not afford me even if you sold every lie you have ever told. I turned around and got into my car. The door slammed shut with a solid, reassuring thud, sealing me inside my climate-controlled fortress. I pressed the start button and the engine purred to life. Brad was banging on the window now, his face twisted in ugly, impotent rage. Open the door, Simone. Do not walk away from me. You need us. You are nothing without us. I put the car in reverse. I did not look at him. I looked at the rear-view camera, watching the guidelines curve as I backed out. I am not nothing, Brad, I whispered to the empty car. I am the one who signs the checks. I shifted into drive and peeled out of the lot, leaving him standing there in a cloud of exhaust fumes, screaming at a woman who had already left him in the dust. He was furious, not because I said no, but because for the first time in his life, he realized he was the one who was small. My phone vibrated against the glass surface of my desk, interrupting the quiet hum of the climate control system in my penthouse laboratory. I glanced at the screen. It was Chloe. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I wanted her to sit in the silence for a moment. I wanted her to feel the distance between us. Hello, Chloe. I answered, my voice calm and professional. Auntie Simone. Her voice was wet and thick with tears, but it sounded practiced, like a performance she had rehearsed in front of a mirror. I am so scared. The school just emailed. They said if the tuition is not paid in 48 hours, they are going to give my spot to someone on the wait list. I am going to lose everything. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, watching the data stream on my monitor. That sounds very stressful, Chloe. Have you spoken to your parents? Mom is crying in her room and Dad is yelling on the phone in the garage. Chloe sobbed. Nobody is helping me, and I just kept thinking about you. About how mean I was at dinner. Here it came. The pivot. The hook. I am really sorry about your bracelet, Auntie Simone. I really am. I was just stressed about school and I took it out on you. It was just an accident. I know it was just a cheap thing, but I should not have broken it. Just a cheap thing. Even in her apology, she had to devalue me. She had to remind me that my possessions were beneath her. It is okay, Chloe, I lied, letting the line hang loose to see what she would reel in. I knew you would understand, she sniffled, her voice instantly brightening. You are always the nice one, Auntie. You are the only one who gets me. That is why I called. I have another problem. A really big one. What is it, Chloe? Well, I was so upset about the tuition thing that I threw my violin case. And I forgot the violin was inside. It cracked the neck, Auntie. My beautiful violin. I cannot go to the conservatory without an instrument. Even if the tuition gets fixed, I need a violin. You broke your violin, I asked. The one I bought you for your 16th birthday. The one that cost $12,000. It was an accident, she whined. Just like the bracelet. But I found a new one. It is a Guarneri copy. It is perfect. The seller wants $15,000 for it. And I know you have savings from your gardening business. Mom says you hoard money because you do not have any kids or a husband to spend it on. So, I thought maybe you could buy it for me as a graduation gift, since you did not get me anything else. The audacity was breathtaking. She had destroyed a $12,000 instrument in a tantrum, and now she wanted me to replace it with a more expensive one because in her mind, my money was just sitting there, waiting for her to claim it. She thought my childlessness made my resources hers by default. $15,000 is a lot of money for a gardener. Chloe, I said. Oh, come on, Auntie, do not be stingy. She snapped, her tone sharpening. You live in a tiny apartment and drive an old car. What else are you going to do with it? Just buy me the violin. If you do, I will tell Mom to invite you to the beach house this summer. I will even let you sit in the front seat. She was bargaining with scraps of affection. She was offering me the privilege of being tolerated in exchange for $15,000. I think you should ask your father, I said. He seems to have a lot of big plans for money lately. My father is useless, she screamed, her mask slipping completely. He is broke. Everyone is broke except you. Just give me the money, Simone. You owe me. You are my aunt. It is your job to help me. My job. I looked at the patent on my wall. My job is done, Chloe, I said, and I hung up. The heavy steel door of the private jewelry atelier buzzed and clicked open, allowing me to step into the hushed, climate-controlled sanctuary. This was not the kind of store found in a shopping mall with fluorescent lights and glass cases full of mass-produced baubles. This was a place where appointments were mandatory and prices were never discussed above a whisper. Elias, the master jeweler, looked up from his workbench, his monocle reflecting the low, warm light. He stood immediately, wiping his hands on a leather apron. Miss Williams, he said with a warm smile that faltered as soon as he saw my face. You are early for your annual commission. I wish I was here for a new piece, Elias, I said, walking to the counter. I placed the linen napkin down with a heaviness that had nothing to do with the weight of the metal. I need you to look at this. I unfolded the cloth. The shattered remains of the bracelet lay there like a crime scene. The platinum twisted and snapped, the magnificent black opal fractured down the center, its inner fire dim and jagged. Elias gasped. It was a visceral sound of pain, the kind an artist makes when they see a masterpiece slashed. He reached out with trembling fingers, picking up the largest shard with his tweezers. He moved it under the microscope, adjusting the focus with rapid movements. This is a tragedy, he murmured. Do you know what you have here? This is raw black opal from the Lightning Ridge mines in New South Wales. The red fire in this stone is the rarest coloration in the world. It takes millions of years for the earth to forge this. I know, I said quietly. Elias looked up, his expression grave. Who did this? This was not an accident. Platinum does not snap like this from a drop. This was torque. Someone forced it. My niece, I said. She thought it was plastic. She said her mother told her it was from a flea market. Elias stared at me in disbelief. A flea market? He looked back at the stone, shaking his head. I just updated the appraisal on this stone last month, Simone. The market for high-grade raw opal has exploded. The replacement value of this piece right now sits at $85,000. $85,000. I let the number hang in the air. My sister had called it trash. My brother-in-law had laughed and called it a $5 toy. They had treated a fortune like garbage because they were too ignorant to recognize value when it did not have a designer label slapped on it. Can you fix it? I asked. Elias sighed, studying the fracture lines. I cannot restore it to what it was. The stone is broken, but I can save it. I can recut the edges and reset it. We can use gold to fill the fracture, a technique like kintsugi. It will be different. It will be sharper. But it will be even more valuable because of the gold weight. Do it, I said. And Elias, I need something else. I need a full formal appraisal report. I want the origin of the stone, the platinum grade, and the current market value typed up on your official letterhead. I want it embossed and signed. Elias looked at me over the rim of his glasses. He saw the cold fire in my eyes, a reflection of the stone he held. You are going to show them, he said. I am going to destroy them, I corrected. I want them to know exactly what they broke. I want them to see the number on that paper and realize that the flea market jewelry they laughed at is worth more than their dignity. Elias nodded, solemn and professional. I will have it ready by Friday. It will be the most beautiful weapon I have ever made. I walked out of the shop into the blinding afternoon sun. $85,000. I had the number. Now I just needed the audience. And thanks to the party I was about to orchestrate, I would have front row seats to their regret. I sat in the climate-controlled silence of my car with the appraisal report resting on the passenger seat like a loaded gun. $85,000. The number burned in my mind. It was time to pull the trigger, but first, I needed to gather them all in one place. I needed a stage big enough for their humiliation. I picked up my phone and dialed Ebony. She answered on the second ring, her voice tight with the specific stress of a woman who was maxing out credit cards to maintain an illusion. "What do you want, Simone?" she snapped. "Unless you are calling to tell me you found $20,000 in your couch cushions, I do not have time for you. The GoFundMe is stalled and I am trying to return a pair of Louboutins without a receipt." I took a deep breath, channeling the submissive younger sister she expected me to be. I kept my voice low and hesitant, the way I used to speak before I realized I owned the bank. "I think I found a solution, Ebony," I said. "I was working today. At the estate in Buckhead. You know, the one with the marble fountain in the driveway?" Ebony sighed loudly. "I do not care about your gardening job, Simone. You should care about this one," I interrupted gently. "The owner, Mrs. Sterling. She is on the board of the Southern Arts Philanthropy Group. I overheard her talking on the terrace. They are looking for a new protege, a young musician to sponsor. A full ride plus a stipend for the family to ensure the artist has a stable home environment." The line went silent. I could practically hear the gears turning in Ebony's head. Greed was a powerful drug, and I had just offered her a fix. "Did you talk to her?" Ebony asked, her voice suddenly sharp and hungry. "Did you mention Chloe?" "I did," I lied. "I told her my niece is a violin prodigy who was unfairly targeted by a corrupt scholarship fund. I told her you are a devoted mother fighting the system. She was very interested, Ebony. She said she loves stories about resilience. She wants to meet you." Ebony gasped. "Oh my God. This is it. This is the miracle I manifested. When can we meet her? Do I need to go to her office? I have nothing to wear. Everything is at the dry cleaners because I cannot pay the bill." "No," I said, closing the trap. "She does not do office meetings. She likes to see the families in their element. She wants to see community support. I told her you were planning a fundraising gala at your home to support Chloe's education." "A gala," Ebony repeated, testing the word. "Yes, a gala. That sounds perfect. I can invite everyone. The church group, the neighbors, Brad's clients. We can show her how beloved Chloe is." "Exactly," I said. "Make it big, Ebony. Make it lavish. Mrs. Sterling is impressed by appearances. She needs to see that you are people of substance." Ebony was already planning. "I can get the caterer to defer payment if I promise him a shout-out on Instagram. I can borrow the table linens from the event planner next door. Brad can get the wine." "Oh, Simone, this is genius. For once you actually made yourself useful." I gripped the steering wheel tight. "Just make sure it is perfect, Ebony. Mrs. Sterling is very particular. I will bring her on Saturday night. You just make sure the house looks like $1 million. It will look like 10 million. Ebony promised, her arrogance fully restored. "Just stick to the gardening, Simone. Let me handle the hosting. I know how to impress rich people. You just make sure she shows up." I hung up the phone. A cold smile spread across my face. She had no idea. She thought she was preparing for a savior. She did not know she was setting the table for her own executioner. She wanted to impress rich people. Well, she was about to meet the richest person she knew, and she would not like it one bit. The house smelled of desperation and expensive lilies. It was an intoxicating blend of manic energy and reckless spending that filled every room of the McMansion. Ebony and Brad had not just swallowed the bait, they had choked on it. They truly believed that a billionaire philanthropist named Mrs. Sterling was coming to save them, and they were determined to put on a show that would dazzle her into writing a blank check. I stood in the kitchen polishing silver that Ebony had rented an hour ago. From the hallway I could hear Brad on the phone. His voice was hushed but urgent, carrying the specific tremor of a gambling addict doubling down on a bad hand. "Marcus, listen to me, I need another 15,000. Cash, tonight." He paused, listening to whatever threats the loan shark was screaming on the other end. "I know I missed the Tuesday payment," Brad hissed, "but this is bigger. We are hosting a whale, Marcus. A real whale. She is coming tomorrow night to drop a 6-figure sponsorship on Chloe. As soon as that check clears, I will pay you back double. I just need the cash to set the stage. I need the premium champagne. I need the security detail. You have to spend money to make money right. He was borrowing money from a violent criminal to throw a party for a woman who did not exist. He was leveraging his safety against a lie I had invented in a parking lot. It was terrifying, and it was perfect. In the living room, Ebony was directing a crew of movers she had hired on credit. They were hauling out the furniture they actually owned, which was stained and worn, and replacing it with high-end staging pieces. White velvet sofas, lucite tables, and abstract sculptures that looked like they belonged in a museum lobby. She was literally replacing her reality with a rental. "Careful with that rug," Ebony shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at a mover. "That is silk. That is... It costs more than your truck." She turned to see me watching her. Her eyes were bright with feverish greed, pupils dilated. She looked like she was high on the potential of money. "Simone, stop standing there like a statue," she snapped. "Did you iron the tablecloths for the buffet? Mrs. Sterling cannot see wrinkles. Rich people hate wrinkles." "I am finishing them now," I said, keeping my voice submissive. "Good," Ebony said, adjusting a diamond necklace that I knew she had rented from a high-end service an hour ago. "And make sure you stay in the kitchen tomorrow night during the party. We need someone to manage the caterers and keep the glasses full. I told Mrs. Sterling you were our house manager. It sounds better than gardener. House manager." She was demoting me from sister to staff in her own mind before the party even started. "Of course, Ebony," I said. "Whatever helps." She looked around the room, satisfied with her fake palace. "You just do not get it, Simone. This is how the world works. If they smell poverty on you, they run. You have to look like you do not need the money. That is the only way they give it to you. It is called optics." Optics. She was lecturing me on optics while standing in a house she was about to lose, wearing jewelry she did not own, waiting for a savior who was actually her executioner. Brad walked in, wiping sweat from his forehead. He gave Ebony a thumbs up. "The cash is on the way. We are good. We are going to pull this off." They smiled at each other, conspirators in their own demise. They thought they were building a stage for their triumph. They had no idea they were actually building the gallows, and I was the one tying the knot. The morning of the gala arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. I pulled up to the house at 7 in the morning as instructed. The driveway was already buzzing with activity. A florist van was unloading white hydrangeas by the armful, and a lighting crew was rigging spots to highlight the rented fountain. It was a production worthy of a movie set, and just as artificial. I walked to the front door, but before I could touch the handle, it swung open. Beatrice stood there wearing a silk caftan and a face mask. She did not look happy to see me. She looked like a general inspecting a soldier who had shown up to inspection with unpolished boots. "You are late, Simone," she hissed, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. "The caterers are behind schedule." The sous chef cut his finger and had to go to the urgent care. "We are down a set of hands." I blinked. "I am a guest, Mom. I am the one bringing the donor. I am not the kitchen staff." Beatrice laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Do not be ridiculous, Simone. You are family. Family pitches in. Besides, let us be honest. You are not really a guest, are you? You are the help who got lucky enough to know someone important. Now get in the kitchen." I followed her down the hallway past the white velvet sofas that no one was allowed to sit on. The kitchen was chaos. Trays of canapes were half assembled, and the floor was sticky with spilled simple syrup. "Here," Beatrice said, thrusting a bucket and a rag into my hands. "The floor is a disaster. It needs to be spotless before the guests arrive. And after that, you need to finish plating the tartare." I looked at the bucket. "You want me to scrub the floor, on my hands and knees, in my gala dress?" I had brought my dress in a garment bag, but the implication was clear. She saw me as a creature of the floor. "Change into something else," Beatrice snapped. "And yes, I want you to scrub. You are good at manual labor, Simone. You have those strong worker hands. You are used to digging in the dirt and hauling bags of fertilizer. It is natural for you." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a slap. "Ebony cannot do it. She is upstairs resting. She needs to preserve her energy. She needs to look fresh and radiant for Mrs. Sterling. You know how stress affects her complexion. She gets blotchy. You do not have that problem. Your skin is tough. It can take the work." There it was again. The belief that my darkness made me durable, made me less capable of feeling pain or exhaustion. She thought I was built for service while Ebony was built for leisure. I took the bucket. I did not argue. I did not throw the soapy water in her face, though the urge was electric in my veins. I wanted them to see this. I wanted to remember this feeling of the cold tile against my knees and the smell of lemon chemical cleaner stinging my nose. I wanted to etch this moment into my memory so that when I brought the hammer down later, I would not feel a single ounce of mercy. I got down on my knees. I dipped the rag in the water. Ebony walked in 10 minutes later wearing a silk robe and holding a green juice. She stepped carefully over my legs, not even looking down. "Missed a spot in the corner, Simone," she said breezily. "Make sure it shines. We want Mrs. Sterling to see her reflection." I scrubbed harder. Oh, she would see her reflection all right. She would see everything. I cleaned their floors, I prepped their food, I polished their rented silver. I did it all with a terrifying efficiency, because I knew that in less than 12 hours, I would be the one watching them scramble in the dirt. "Rest up, Ebony," I thought as I wrung out the dirty rag. "Enjoy your nap, because after tonight, you are going to be working for the rest of your life." I walked into the living room with a feather duster in my hand and a heart full of ice. The white velvet sofas were arranged like stage props waiting for actors, but I was looking for something else. I was looking for the unblinking eye that had seen everything. High in the corner, nestled between the crown molding and a silk drapery rod, sat the security camera. It was a high-end model with 4,000 resolution and audio. Brad had installed it to watch the cleaning staff because he was paranoid about theft. The irony was delicious. He installed it to catch thieves, but instead he had caught his own daughter destroying my property and his own wife laughing about it. I walked over to the smart home hub mounted on the wall near the pantry. It was a tablet locked into a metal frame. I knew the passcode. It was the same one Brad used for everything. His birthday, 0426. The screen unlocked with a cheerful chirp. I navigated to the security app. My hands were steady now. The trembling from the kitchen was gone, replaced by the surgical precision of a scientist extracting a sample. I scrolled back through the timeline. 2 weeks ago, Sunday night, 7:40 p.m. I pressed play. There it was. On the small screen, the scene played out in miniature. I saw myself sitting at the end of the table. I saw Chloe standing on the chair. I saw the bracelet swinging, and then I saw the snap. The audio was crisp. I heard the crunch of the opal. I heard Ebony say it was just a bracelet. I heard Brad call it a $5 toy. I heard my mother tell me to clean it up. It was worse watching it back. In the moment, I had been in shock. Now I could see the faces. I saw the smirk on Ebony's lips before the bracelet even broke. She had been waiting for it. She had wanted it to happen. I saw the way Brad looked at my mother, seeking approval for his cruelty. It was a masterclass in group bullying, and they were all valedictorians. I pulled a flash drive from my pocket. It was small, sleek, and encrypted. I plugged it into the side of the hub. I selected the clip. Export. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 20%. 50%. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy footsteps. Brad. "Come on," I whispered to the screen. 70%. Simone Brad's voice boomed from the hallway. "Where is the scotch? The caterers said they cannot find the case I bought." I kept my back to him, dusting the frame of the hub with my free hand while my body blocked the screen. "Check the pantry, Brad." I called out, my voice flat and bored. "Top shelf behind the pasta." I heard him grumble and turned toward the pantry. The footsteps faded. 90%. Done. I pulled the drive out and slipped it into my bra. I closed the app. I wiped the screen with my duster, removing my fingerprints. I had it. I had the smoking gun. I had the video that would strip them naked in front of the very people they were trying to impress. I looked up at the camera one last time and winked. Then I went back to dusting. Let them have their clean house. I had the dirt. The sun had set, painting the sky a deep, bruised purple, but the driveway of the McMansion was lit up like a movie premiere. Valets were parking cars that cost more than most people's retirement funds. Porsches, Bentleys, and a few rented limousines lined the curb. Ebony had invited everyone. Her neighbors, her social media followers, her frenemies from the country club. She wanted witnesses to her triumph. She wanted an audience for her salvation. I stood in the pantry watching through the cracked door. The house was transformed. The rented furniture gleamed under the chandeliers. The catering staff moved silently, offering trays of tuna tartare and caviar blinis. It looked expensive. It looked perfect. It looked like a lie. Ebony was holding court in the center of the living room, wearing a silver gown that shimmered like fish scales. She was laughing too loudly, her head thrown back, her hand resting possessively on Brad's arm. Brad looked less confident. He kept checking his watch, his eyes darting toward the front door every few seconds. He was waiting for Mrs. Sterling. He was waiting for the check. "So when is she arriving?" a woman in a red dress asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. "This mystery donor, is she real, Ebony? Or is this another one of your projects?" Ebony's smile didn't waver, but her eyes tightened. "She is very real, Cynthia, and she is very private. That is why she requested this intimate gathering. She wants to see the community support. She wants to see that we are worthy of her investment. Worthy." The word hung in the air, heavy with irony. "She will be here any minute," Ebony continued, her voice rising slightly. "She is just finishing up a board meeting. You know how billionaires are. Their time is not their own." I checked my watch. 7:55. It was time. I slipped out the back door of the kitchen. The night air was cool and smelled of jasmine and exhaust. I walked around the side of the house, keeping to the shadows. I reached my car, parked down the street, away from the valet line. Inside on the back seat was a garment bag. I unzipped it. The fabric inside was not linen or cotton. It was silk. Heavy black silk, structured and architectural. It was a gown from the latest Alexander McQueen collection, a piece I had bought in Paris last year. I slipped out of my cleaning clothes, my scrub pants and t-shirt stained with floor wax, and stepped into the dress. It fit like armor. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the velvet box Elias had given me. I opened it. The bracelet lay inside, reborn. The opal was still fractured, but the gold vein running through it made it look deliberate, powerful. It was not just a stone anymore. It was a statement. I clasped it around my wrist. The metal was cool and heavy. It felt like a promise. I put on my heels, 4 inches of black leather stilettos. I checked my makeup in the rearview mirror. Dark lips, sharp eyeliner. I did not look like a gardener. I looked like a queen coming to reclaim her throne. I got out of the car. 2 men stepped out of the shadows behind me. They were large, silent, and wearing earpieces. My security detail. I had hired them not for protection, but for intimidation. I walked toward the house. I did not go to the kitchen door. I did not go to the side entrance. I walked straight up the driveway, my heels clicking on the pavement like gunshots. The valets stared. The guests mingling on the lawn stopped talking. I reached the front door. The bouncer Ebony had hired looked at me confused. "Name?" he asked, checking his clipboard. I did not stop. I did not look at his list. I just looked him in the eye. "Mrs. Sterling," I said. He stepped back. He opened the door. I walked in. The heavy double doors of the foyer swung open with a theatrical groan that silenced the room instantly. The chatter of the rented crowd died down, replaced by the rustle of silk and the collective intake of breath. They were expecting Mrs. Sterling, the benevolent billionaire I had invented. They were expecting a gray-haired woman in a tweed suit ready to hand out checks. Instead, they got me. I stepped across the threshold. My Alexander McQueen gown moved around me like liquid shadow, the black silk absorbing the light, while the architectural bodice structured my posture into something regal and unyielding. I was not the gardener in the mud-stained tunic anymore. I was a force of nature wrapped in couture. Behind me, my 2 security guards stepped in, closing the doors and taking up positions on either side of the entrance. They stood with their hands clasped in front of them, silent sentinels in dark suits that cost more than Brad's entire wardrobe. Their presence shifted the atmosphere from a party to an event, from a gathering to a visitation. I heard a glass shatter. Someone had dropped their drink. I scanned the room. I saw the shock ripple through the crowd. I saw the neighbors who had ignored me for years now staring with slack jaws. I saw the women from the country club whispering behind their hands, their eyes glued to the necklace and bracelet I wore. The raw black opal, now veined with gold, caught the light from the chandeliers and threw it back with a fire that looked dangerous. It was the same stone Chloe had smashed, but broken things often heal stronger, and this jewelry was now a weapon. Ebony pushed through the crowd, her silver sequins rattling like cheap armor. Her face was a mask of confusion that quickly curdled into rage. She marched up to me, her hands balled into fists at her sides. "What the hell are you doing, Simone?" she hissed, her voice low but carrying in the silence. "You are supposed to be in the kitchen plating the appetizers. And where did you get that dress? Did you steal it from a client's closet? Take it off right now before you ruin it. You look ridiculous." I looked down at her. From the height of my stilettos, she looked small. She looked frantic. She looked like a child playing dress-up in a house that was already slipping through her fingers. I did not answer her. I did not even blink. I simply looked through her as if she were a smudge on a window pane. I turned my head slightly to the guard on my left. "Clear a path," I said softly. The guard stepped forward gently but firmly, moving Ebony aside with a massive hand. "Excuse us, ma'am." Ebony stumbled back, catching herself on a table. She looked at the guard, then at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You cannot do this. This is my house." "Brad, get over here. Simone has lost her mind." Brad appeared from the crowd, holding a glass of champagne that was shaking in his hand. He looked at the guards. He looked at the dress. He looked at the jewelry. And for the first time, I saw the dawn of recognition in his eyes. He realized the gardener was dead. I walked past them. I walked through the center of the room, the crowd parting for me like the Red Sea. I did not look left or right. I kept my eyes fixed on the small stage they had set up for the announcement. Beatrice, my mother, stood near the stage, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres she had been passing around to ingratiate herself with the wealthy guests. She dropped the tray. The metal clattered loudly against the floor, sending crab cakes rolling across the rug. "Simone," she whispered. I did not stop. I ascended the 3 steps to the stage. I stood behind the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the family that had mocked me, the sister who had used me, and the niece who had broken my heart along with my bracelet. They were waiting for a donor. They were waiting for money. I tapped the microphone. The sound boomed through the speakers, echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "Good evening," I said, my voice amplified and commanding. "I understand you are all waiting for the anonymous donor behind the Simone Williams Trust." I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was almost painful. "You can stop waiting. She is already here." The silence following my declaration was absolute, but it was shattered a second later by Ebony's shrill voice cutting through the air like a serrated knife. "Get down from there immediately, Simone. Have you lost your mind?" She rushed toward the stage, her heels skidding slightly on the polished floor. Her face was a landscape of panic and fury, the makeup she had carefully applied now looking like war paint on a losing general. She pointed a shaking finger at the kitchen door. "Get back in the kitchen right now. The hors d'oeuvres need to be replenished, and there are glasses that need washing. Stop playing dress up in my house and do your job." I did not move. I did not flinch. I simply looked down at her from the stage, my expression bored. The guests, however, were not looking at Ebony. They were looking at me. I could hear the whispers ripple through the crowd, starting from the front row and spreading back like a wave. "Is that vintage McQueen?" one woman whispered, her eyes locked on the architectural lines of my bodice. "I saw that on the runway in Paris last season. It costs more than a mid-sized sedan." "And the jewelry," a man murmured to his wife. "Look at the fire in those stones. That is not costume jewelry. Those are investment-grade black opals. Who is she really?" The realization was dawning on them. The woman standing before them was not a servant playing pretend. I carried myself with the easy weight of authority that money buys but cannot teach. My skin glowed under the stage lights, the dark melanin absorbing the brilliance and throwing it back with a richness that made Ebony's spray tan look orange and cheap. Ebony heard the whispers too. She looked around the room, seeing the admiration in the eyes of the people she was desperate to impress. It drove her mad. She stomped her foot on the ground like a petulant child. "Why are you all staring at her?" she shrieked, turning on her own guests. "She is just the gardener. She digs in the dirt for a living. She probably stole that dress from one of her clients. Someone call the police. She is trespassing." Brad stepped forward, then grabbing Ebony's arm. He was pale, his eyes fixed on the bracelet on my wrist. The gold vein I had commissioned Elias to fuse into the fracture caught the light, a jagged lightning bolt of wealth. "Ebony, stop!" he hissed, his voice trembling. "Look at her wrist. That is the bracelet Chloe broke." Ebony yanked her arm away. "I do not care about her stupid rock, Brad. I want her out. She is ruining everything. Mrs. Sterling is going to be here any minute, and I will not have my sister embarrassing me." I leaned into the microphone. My voice was soft, but the amplification system carried it to every corner of the room, burying Ebony's screeching. "Mrs. Sterling is not coming, Ebony," I said, "because Mrs. Sterling does not exist." Ebony froze. "What?" "I invented her," I said, my voice cool and pleasant. "Just like you invented the idea that I was nothing. I created a lie that you were desperate enough to believe because you are so greedy for validation that you never stop to ask why a billionaire would want to meet you in a house you do not even own." The room gasped. I saw the neighbors exchange looks. I saw the loan shark's runner, who Brad had snuck in the back door, straighten up and pay attention. The facade was cracking, and I was just getting started. "I am the donor, Ebony," I said. "I am the trust. And I am the one who is about to show everyone exactly who you really are." Ebony did the only thing her fractured psyche could handle in that moment. She ignored reality completely. She grabbed the microphone stand and physically turned it away from me, pivoting toward the bandshell where Chloe was waiting with her violin. "Play, Ebony," shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "Play the concerto, Chloe. Show them. Show everyone why we deserve this." She was manic, trying to drown out the truth with music, trying to put the mask back on a face that had already been peeled away. Chloe looked annoyed. She did not look like a girl whose future hung in the balance. She looked like a teenager who was missing a party to perform for her mother's friends. She raised the violin to her chin. The first notes were technically perfect and utterly soulless. It was the sound of rote memorization devoid of passion, the sound of $100,000 spent on lessons for a girl who only cared about the fame, not the art. I stood still on the stage watching them. I let her play. I let the screeching high notes fill the room because I knew what was coming next. The audio engineer, a young man Brad had hired for cheap, had not cut the feed to the floor mics. Chloe finished the movement with a flourish that was more arrogant than artistic. The applause was scattered, polite, confused. Ebony rushed to her daughter, hugging her fiercely, whispering frantically in her ear. But she leaned too close to the stand microphone. She forgot the acoustics of the room. She forgot that technology does not keep secrets. Chloe pulled away from her mother's embrace. Her face twisted in a sneer that was projected onto the two massive screens flanking the stage. She leaned in toward Ebony, her mouth inches from the hot mic. "Can we wrap this up, Mom?" Chloe complained, her voice booming through the speakers with crystal clarity. "Just get the check from that old investor hag so we can kick Auntie Dirtbag out." I want to go to the after party and this dress itches. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of 100 socialites simultaneously realizing they were standing in a sewer. Chloe froze, her eyes widening as her own voice echoed back to her from the surround sound speakers. She looked at the microphone, then at the crowd, then at me. Ebony looked like she had been shot. She tried to cover the mic with her hand, but it was too late. The feedback squealed a piercing shriek that made everyone cover their ears. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply walked over to the microphone, moving Ebony's trembling hand aside. "That old investor hag," I said, my voice calm and amplified, "is standing right here, Chloe." And she heard every word. Chloe dropped her bow. It clattered against the stage floor, a wooden echo of the bracelet she had smashed. The guests were murmuring now, a rising tide of judgment and shock. They had come to see a prodigy. Instead, they had seen a spoiled brat who viewed them all as ATMs with legs. I looked out at the crowd. They saw it, I thought. They finally saw what I had lived with for 18 years. The entitlement, the cruelty, the absolute moral rot hiding behind designer labels. I turned to Brad, who was cowering near the buffet table. I gestured to the screen where Chloe's sneering face was still frozen on the live feed. "Is this the artist you wanted me to save, Brad?" I asked. "Is this the future of music?" Brad did not answer. He could not. He was too busy watching his investors pull out their phones and start typing. He knew what was happening. The word was getting out. The narrative was shifting. And for the first time, he was not the one holding the pen. I reached out and took the microphone from the stand, my hand steady and assured. The feedback from Chloe's outburst had faded, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. 100 pairs of eyes were fixed on me. They were confused. They were terrified. They were captivated. My family stood frozen in a tableau of horror. Ebony was clutching her chest, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Brad was wiping sweat from his upper lip, his eyes darting between me and the security guards. Beatrice looked like she was about to faint, her face draining of all color as she stared at the woman she had treated like a servant for 30 years. I let them sit in that silence for a moment longer. I wanted them to feel it. I wanted them to feel the weight of their own ignorance pressing down on them. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice smooth and amplified, reaching every corner of the vaulted ceiling. "You all came here tonight with a purpose. You came to drink expensive champagne. You came to judge. And most importantly, you came to meet Mrs. Sterling. You came to shake the hand of the billionaire savior who was going to write a check big enough to erase the mistakes of this family." I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at Ebony. But Mrs. Sterling could not make it tonight. In fact, Mrs. Sterling has never made it to any meeting, because she does not exist. She is a fiction, a fairy tale I invented to see just how far my sister would go to sell her dignity for $1. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Ebony took a step forward, her face twisting. "You are lying," she hissed. "You are just trying to ruin my night. Get off the stage, Simone." I ignored her. I turned back to the crowd, raising my voice slightly. "For 10 years, this family has lived on a subsidy. They have driven cars they could not afford. They have lived in a house they could not maintain. They have sent their daughter to schools they could not pay for. And every month, a check appeared. A check from the Simone Williams Charitable Trust." I saw the recognition hit a few of the guests. They whispered to each other, connecting the dots. "You thought the trust was named after our grandmother," I said, looking directly at Beatrice. "You thought it was some old family money that I was just managing as the executor. You never stopped to think. You never stopped to ask. You just cashed the checks and wiped your feet on the person who signed them." I took a deep breath. The anger was gone now, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "You called me a gardener. You laughed at my dirty hands. You mocked my clothes. You saw soil under my fingernails and assumed I was digging for pennies. You never bothered to ask what I was growing. You never asked about the patents. You never asked about the biotech firm I sold 3 years ago. You never asked because you were too busy telling me I was worthless. I walked over to where Chloe had dropped her violin. I looked at the instrument, then back at the girl who had called me a dirtbag on a live microphone. You are waiting for the anonymous donor, right? You are waiting for the person who holds the deed to this house. You are waiting for the person who controls your future. I placed my hand on my chest, the black opal at my wrist, catching the spotlight with a flash of dangerous fire. It is me. I am the donor. I am the bank. And the bank is closed. I raised the small black remote control I had swiped from the audio-visual booth earlier. The screens behind me, which had just displayed Chloe's bratty sneer, flickered and went black for a terrifying second. The room held its breath, waiting for the next disaster. Then the screens illuminated with the stark, blinding white of a digital ledger. It was not a video, it was a spreadsheet, a forensic accounting of the last 10 years. The font was small, but projected on a 20-foot screen it was impossible to miss. Rows and rows of data scrolled automatically, like the credits of a movie that nobody wanted to watch. I stepped to the side so the light of the projection hit my face. "Look closely," I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. The guests squinted. They began to read. Column A was the date. Column B was the recipient, always listed as the Williams Family Trust, or directly to Ebony Williams. But it was column C that made the room gasp. Column C was the sender. Simone Williams. Simone Williams. Simone Williams. The name repeated over and over again, line after line, month after month for a decade. It was a hypnotic chant of generosity. "Do you see that transfer in December of 2015? I asked, pointing to a line near the top. $3,000. You told me you could not afford Christmas presents for Chloe. You told everyone Brad was having a slow quarter. I paid for the violin lessons that year." The screen scrolled down. July 2018, $10,000. That was the roof repair. You told the neighbors Brad got a massive bonus. But Brad did not get a bonus, did he? I wrote the check directly to the contractor because you were crying in my kitchen about black mold. Ebony was shaking her head, her eyes wide and fixated on the screen. "No," she whispered. "That is fake. You typed that up." "It is a certified bank statement, Ebony," I said, cold and factual. "You can check the transaction numbers." The screen sped up, scrolling faster through the years. The tuition payments, the car leases, the medical bills, the vacations they claimed were gifts from clients. It was all there. Every single lie they had told to maintain their image was stripped away and replaced with my name. And then the scrolling stopped. The screen froze on the bottom line. The grand total, $250,000. The number was highlighted in bold red. A collective sound of shock rippled through the room. It was the sound of 100 wealthy people realizing the scale of the deception. $250,000. I had not just helped them, I had sustained them. I had been the invisible foundation of their entire lives. I looked at the crowd. $250,000, I repeated, letting the number hang in the air. That is what I paid to be treated like a servant. That is the price of admission I paid to be part of this family. I bought your clothes, I bought your cars, I bought the food you are eating right now. I turned to look at Beatrice, who was staring at the screen with her mouth open, her face gray and old. "You asked me why I did not have a husband or children, Mom," I said softly. "You told me I was hoarding my money. I was not hoarding it. I was giving it to you. I was investing in a family that was laughing at me behind my back." I looked back at the guests. You all wondered who the donor was. You wondered where the money came from. It did not come from a mysterious billionaire. It came from the gardener. It came from the soil. It came from the sister they made sleep in the guest room. The evidence was towering over them, glowing in high definition. There was no spinning this. There was no lie big enough to cover a paper trail that cost $250,000. They were exposed. And they were bankrupt in every sense of the word. The spreadsheet faded to black, leaving a ghostly afterimage of the numbers burned into the retinas of everyone in the room. The silence was thick and heavy, the kind of silence that usually precedes a verdict in a courtroom. I could see Ebony trembling, her hands gripping the edge of a table so hard her knuckles were white. She knew what was coming. She remembered the camera in the corner of the living room. She remembered the moment she had laughed while I picked up the pieces of my heart. I did not give them time to recover. I pressed the next button on the remote. The screen flickered to life again. This time it was a video feed. The date stamp in the corner read 2 weeks ago. The image was crisp, high definition, unsparing in its clarity. It showed the very room we were standing in now. But instead of a gala, it was a dinner scene. There on the screen was Chloe. She was standing on one of the white velvet chairs, her face twisted in a familiar mask of petulant rage. She was holding something in her hand, a bracelet, the same bracelet that was now glittering on my wrist. I watched the guests lean in. They recognized the jewelry. They had just been admiring it. On the screen, Chloe shouted, "I don't want your stupid advice, Auntie. You are just a gardener." And then she swung the bracelet. The audio was perfect. The sickening snap of the platinum echoed through the speakers, amplified 100 times over. It sounded like a bone breaking. The stone hit the marble table with a sharp crack that made half the room flinch. I paused the video right there. The image froze on Chloe's face in the aftermath of the destruction. She did not look sorry. She looked bored. Then I let it play for 5 more seconds, just long enough for the audio to catch the next line. "It is just cheap flea market trash," Chloe's recorded voice sneered. "Mom said it is probably plastic anyway." The room erupted. It was not applause this time. It was a collective sound of disgust. To these people, money was a religion and destroying value was a sin. They had seen the bracelet up close. They knew it was a masterpiece. To hear a teenager dismiss it as trash and smash it for sport was a violation of their deepest social codes. I stepped forward into the spotlight. "That flea market trash," I said, my voice ice cold, "is a raw black opal from the Lightning Ridge mines. It is one of the rarest gemstones on Earth. I had it appraised yesterday." I pulled the folded paper from my clutch and held it up. $85,000. The number hit the room like a physical blow. A woman in the front row actually covered her mouth with her hand. $85,000. That was more than the college tuition they were begging for. That was more than the car Brad drove, and their daughter had smashed it because she was having a bad day. I looked at Chloe, who was shrinking back against the wall, her face pale. "You destroyed an $85,000 object," I said, speaking directly to her. "And then you laughed about it. You called it trash because you are so blinded by your own entitlement that you cannot see value unless it comes with a price tag, you understand." I turned to the crowd. "This is the family asking for your charity. This is the prodigy who needs your support. They destroy fortune and beg for pennies. They treat family like servants and servants like dirt. And they do it all while spending my money." I looked at the frozen image on the screen one last time. The sneer, the broken metal, the ugly truth of it all. The video proves one thing I said, turning off the projector. You can put a girl in a conservatory. You can dress her in silk. You can buy her a $12,000 violin. But you cannot buy class. And you certainly cannot buy a soul. I unclasped the platinum latch on my wrist with a deliberate, slow movement. The mechanism clicked open, a tiny sound that echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. I held the bracelet up to the light. The black opal spun slowly, the gold veins catching the glare of the chandelier and throwing sparks of green and crimson fire across the faces of the stunned guests. "Look at it!" I commanded, my voice sweeping over the room. $85,000. This is what you called trash. This is what you let your daughter smash because she was having a temper tantrum. I lowered my hand and looked directly at Ebony, who was trembling so violently her sequins rattled. This stone was formed by pressure over millions of years. It is rare. It is resilient. It is everything you are not. This single piece of jewelry is worth more than the car in your driveway. It is worth more than the tuition you cannot pay. And quite frankly, it is worth more than the character of every single person standing on this stage combined. Brad flinched as if I had struck him. Beatrice looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "You wanted a donor," I said, slipping the bracelet back onto my wrist where it belonged. "You wanted a savior. Well, you just lost her. I am officially terminating the trust. As of this second, the bank accounts are frozen. The credit cards are canceled. The mortgage payments stop today. The ride is over. You have spent 10 years spending my money to buy an image of success. Now you can try buying it with your own money, which, as we all know, is zero." I turned my back on them. The verdict was delivered. The execution was complete. The sound that tore out of Brad's throat was not human. It was the animalistic howl of a man watching his life disintegrate in real time. The shame, the exposure, and the financial ruin collided in his chest and exploded outward in violence. He lunged at me, his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred, his hands reaching for my throat. "You ruined us!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "You ungrateful witch!" I did not step back. I did not raise a hand to defend myself. I did not have to. The two security guards moved with a speed that blurred the air. Before Brad could get within 3 feet of me, the larger guard stepped forward. He caught Brad's wrist in midair, twisting it with a practiced efficiency that sent a sickening pop through the room. Brad's momentum was used against him. He was spun around and slammed face first onto the polished hardwood floor. The sound of his expensive tuxedo hitting the ground was followed by a groan of agony. "Stay down," the guard commanded, pressing a knee into Brad's back. The room was in chaos. Guests were screaming, knocking over champagne flutes as they scrambled back from the violence. But the drama was not over. As Brad struggled against the weight of the guard, the front doors swung open again. This time it was not a caterer. It was 4 uniformed police officers. I checked my watch. Right on time. One of the officers marched straight to where Brad was pinned. "Bradley Williams," he said, his voice cutting through the panic. "You are under arrest." Brad lifted his head, blood trickling from his nose. For what he spat. "For credit card fraud, identity theft, and solicitation of illegal loans," the officer recited, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "We received a tip regarding the embezzlement of funds from the Simone Williams Charitable Trust and the use of fraudulent credentials to secure high-interest loans." I watched as they hauled him up. The cold steel of the cuffs clicked around his wrists. He looked at me, his eyes wide with betrayal. I had not just cut off the money. I had handed the evidence of his desperation to the authorities. I had burned the bridge, and then I had arrested the arsonist. The foreclosure notice was taped to the front door before the sun had fully risen. It was a bright orange sticker that clashed hideously with the custom mahogany finish. But it was the most honest thing that had been on that house in years. I watched from my car, parked a safe distance away, as the final act of their tragedy played out. The bank representatives were efficient. They did not care about the gala or the social standing of the occupants. They simply changed the locks and escorted the residents to the curb. Ebony stood on the sidewalk wearing oversized sunglasses to hide her swollen eyes. She looked like a refugee from a fashion magazine. Surrounding her was a fortress of luggage. Louis Vuitton trunks, Goyard duffel bags, and Hermes carry-ons stacked in a precarious pile on the concrete. It was $50,000 worth of leather and monogrammed canvas. It was a collection that would have made anyone envious in an airport lounge. But here on the street corner, it just looked ridiculous. Chloe sat on top of a limited edition hard-shell suitcase, scrolling frantically through her phone. I could see her mouth moving, likely complaining that the Wi-Fi had been cut. She looked up at her mother, expecting a solution, expecting a car to whisk them away to a hotel. I watched Ebony pull out her phone. She tapped the screen, likely trying to summon an Uber Black to take them to the Ritz. She waited. Then she frowned. She tapped again, harder this time. I knew exactly what she was seeing. Payment method declined. Her credit cards were dead. Her bank accounts were frozen. She had a pile of designer bags filled with designer clothes, but she did not have enough liquid cash to buy a bottle of water, let alone a ride across town. She looked up and down the empty street. The neighbors, the ones who had drank her champagne last night, kept their blinds closed. No one was coming to help. She kicked the Louis Vuitton trunk in frustration, scuffing the expensive leather. It was the perfect ending. They were drowning in luxury but starving for reality. They had everything they ever wanted to show off, and absolutely nothing they needed to survive. The air in the back of the burger barn smelled like old fryer oil and regret. It was a thick, suffocating scent that clung to Chloe's hair and coated her skin in a fine layer of grease. She stood at the deep stainless steel sink, her hands submerged in water that was a murky gray soup of ketchup and soggy bread. It had been 3 weeks since the email arrived, the one from the New England Conservatory. Admission rescinded due to financial delinquency. The dream of concert halls and Paris trips had evaporated, leaving her here in a polyester uniform that scratched her skin. She scrubbed at a stubborn patch of dried cheese on a plastic tray. Her nails, which used to be perfectly manicured, and tapping impatiently on her phone screen, were gone. They were broken down to the quick snagging on the rough green sponge. Her feet ached in the cheap, non-slip shoes she had been forced to buy from a thrift store. "Hey, new girl, move it." The manager slammed a towering stack of dirty fry baskets onto the counter next to her, splashing cold, greasy water onto her face. His name was Gary, and he smelled like stale cigarettes and impatience. "I am going as fast as I can," Chloe muttered, keeping her head down, blinking back tears of humiliation. "Fast." Gary laughed, a harsh barking sound that made her flinch. "You call this fast? You are moving like you are underwater. Look at this stack. It is piling up. The lunch rush is starting in 10 minutes, and we are out of clean trays. You are useless back here." He leaned in close, invading her personal space, just like she used to do to Simone when she wanted money. Honestly, he sneered, his face inches from hers. "If you cannot even wash a plastic plate without crying, what are you actually good for? You are just taking up space." Chloe froze. The words echoed in her head, bouncing around her skull like a trapped bird. "What are you good for? You are just taking up space." It was the exact same thing she had screamed at her aunt when the Wi-Fi lagged. It was the same venom she had spit at the woman who had paid for her violin lessons for a decade. Now she was on the other side of the counter. She was the help. She was the dirt. And as she looked at the mountain of dirty dishes, she realized with a sinking heart that, unlike Simone, she did not have a secret fortune to save her. She just had the grease and the noise and the long, empty shift ahead. Ebony had turned on her like a cornered rat. In the cramped motel room, they were forced to share. The golden child had finally shown her true teeth, screaming that it was all Beatrice's fault, for spoiling her, for making her believe the world owed her a living. She had thrown Beatrice out with nothing but a tote bag and a curse. Now Beatrice stood in the lobby of the Sovereign building, shivering despite the warmth of the cavernous marble hall. She looked small and frail, stripped of the arrogance that had defined her for decades. She approached the concierge desk, her hands trembling as she smoothed her wrinkled skirt. "I need to see my daughter," she whispered. "Simone Williams. Please tell her I am here. Tell her I have nowhere else to go." The concierge, a young woman with a sharp professional gaze, did not even check the computer. She had her orders. "I am sorry, ma'am," she said, her voice cool and final. "Ms. Williams has strict security protocols. No unannounced visitors, especially not family." Beatrice felt her legs give out. She sank to her knees right there on the polished stone, clasping her hands together in a prayer of desperation. The humiliation burned, but hunger burned hotter. "Please," she sobbed, tears tracking through her powder. "I am her mother. I just want to say, I am sorry. The concierge picked up the phone, but not to call Simone. You need to leave, ma'am, the woman said calmly without a shred of pity. Or I will have to call security to escort you off the premises. Beatrice looked up at the gold ceiling, realizing that the daughter she had treated like a servant was now the queen of a castle she was forbidden to enter. The auctioneer's gavel hit the podium with a decisive crack that sounded like justice. Sold to bidder number 426. I lowered my paddle and signed the paperwork. I bought the house for a fraction of what Ebony claimed it was worth, but I did not buy it to live in. I bought it to exorcise the ghosts. I walked through the front door of the house that used to be a monument to my sister's greed. The white velvet sofas were gone. The rented statues were gone. The air no longer smelled of desperation and expensive lilies. It smelled of fresh paint and possibility. I turned the McMansion into the headquarters for my new initiative, the Williams Foundation for the Arts. I filled the empty rooms with music stands and easels. I invited brilliant young minds from the city to fill the silence with art. But there was a catch. The scholarship application was not just about talent. It was about character. We interviewed their teachers. We watched how they treated the cleaning staff. We made sure that every student who walked through these doors understood that humility was just as important as the notes they played. I stood in the foyer listening to a young cellist practice in the room where Chloe used to scream at me. The music was beautiful, rich, and soulful. I smiled. I had finally cleaned the house, and for the first time in history, it was truly valuable. The candle flickered softly between us, casting a warm glow over the white tablecloth. It was a stark contrast to the harsh fluorescent lights of the courtroom where Julian usually sat beside me. Tonight, there were no depositions and no restraining orders. There was just a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir and a man who looked at me as if I were the only person in the room. Julian reached across the table, his hand brushing against mine. His touch was gentle, devoid of the grasping desperation I was used to from my family. You were brilliant today, Simone, he said, his voice low and steady. The way you restructured that acquisition deal. I have never seen anyone navigate a hostile takeover with such grace. You have a mind like a steel trap. I smiled, feeling a flush of warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. For years, my value had been measured by what I could give or what I could fix. But Julian did not care about my bank balance. He had seen the financials and he had never blinked. He cared about my thoughts. He fell in love with my strategy, not my inheritance. Thank you, Julian, I whispered. He squeezed my hand. I am just stating facts. You are formidable, Simone, and I am honored just to sit at your table. For the first time in my life, I believed him. I was not a resource to be mined. I was a woman to be cherished. The morning light in the garden was different from the harsh, artificial glare of the gala. It was soft and forgiving, filtering through the leaves of the ancient oak trees I had paid a fortune to save. I sat on a teak bench, my hands resting in my lap, stained slightly with the rich, dark soil that my family had always despised. To them, dirt was a sign of poverty. To me, it was the source of life. It was the only honest thing in a world full of synthetic lies. I breathed in the scent of blooming jasmine and wet earth. It was the smell of peace. For the first time in 30 years, the noise in my head had stopped. There were no demands. There were no insults disguised as jokes. There was just the wind in the branches and the distant hum of the city that I now owned a significant piece of. I looked down at my left wrist. The sun caught the surface of the black opal bracelet, igniting the stone with a sudden flash of electric blue and deep crimson. The gold vein that Elias had used to fuse the shattered pieces together glittered defiantly. It was no longer just a piece of jewelry. It was a map of my survival. It was proof that you can be broken and come back sharper, harder, and more valuable than before. My phone buzzed on the bench beside me, disrupting the stillness. I hesitated. My personal number was changed weeks ago, given only to Julian and a few trusted staff members. But looking at the screen, I saw a string of unknown digits. A burner phone. Or maybe a borrowed one. I picked it up. The message preview popped up on the glass screen. Simone, please. It is Ebony. We are at a shelter, but they are kicking us out at noon. Chloe has a fever. Mom is not talking. We have nothing. I know I messed up. I know I was awful, but we are blood. Please just send us enough for a motel, just for tonight. I will never ask again. Please, Simone. You cannot let us die out here. I read the words twice. A month ago, that text would have sent my heart racing. A month ago, I would have felt the crushing weight of obligation, the toxic whisper that said it was my job to fix what they had broken. I would have transferred the money. I would have bought the silence. But today, I felt nothing. I did not feel anger. I did not feel pity. I just felt a quiet detachment, like watching a storm rage on a television screen with the volume turned down. I saw the manipulation woven into every word, using Chloe's health, using the blood card. It was the same old song, just played on a cheaper instrument. They were not asking for forgiveness. They were asking for a transaction. They did not want a sister. They wanted an ATM. I looked at the garden around me. I looked at the fragile orchids I had cultivated, which required patience and specific conditions to thrive. I realized that my family was not a flower. They were weeds. And you cannot grow a garden if you let the weeds choke the life out of the soil. I did not type a reply. I did not offer a lecture or a goodbye. There was nothing left to say. The time for words had ended in that ballroom under the projector screen. My thumb hovered over the menu button. I selected the contact options. I pressed block caller. The message vanished. The digital thread was severed. I pressed the power button on the side of the phone, and the screen went black, reflecting the canopy of leaves above me. I set the phone back down on the bench face down. I picked up my trowel and turned back to the earth. The sun was warm on my back. The birds were singing. And for the first time in my life, I was completely and utterly free. This story serves as a powerful reminder that your value is defined by your internal character, not by how others perceive you. Simone teaches us that silence is often the loudest response to disrespect. When toxic family members view your kindness as weakness and your generosity as an entitlement, the most empowering thing you can do is close the bank of your energy. We learn that dignity cannot be bought, and true resilience involves knowing when to stop watering weeds so you can finally bloom. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and completely out of their reach. If you are ready to stop setting yourself on fire to keep others warm, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, what was the moment you finally realized your own worth?